Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Carrie Henderson. Thanks for joining. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Heat of Command podcast. And we are super excited. We have another special guest today. We love when we have guests on our show so that you guys don't just have to listen to Kyle and I go off on tangents and rant about whatever the thoughts of the day are that are going through our heads. So today we have Captain Vermeulen from Boca Raton, Florida. He is a station captain. And I love it because he reached out to us on LinkedIn, and we have so much in common about our thoughts on the fire service and the fire industry today, and where it's going and where we think we would love for it to go, especially in the leadership and the mental health avenues there. So he mailed us his book, The Modern Fire Officer, Communicate, Motivate, and Lead. And that came to us pretty quick. And Kyle and I both got right into it. It is tons of what we talk about here every episode in the Heat of Command podcast, and talk about some of the similarities and some of his own thoughts that he has that we think you'll really, really enjoy. And also talk about some mental health stuff. He has an article out as well, and we'd love to pick his brain about some of that stuff because it's super cool. It goes right along with what we talked about last week with customer service, and a whole new thought that I don't think we even talked about, Kyle, when we talked about customer service, and a whole another avenue with customer service. So thank you for coming on, and thank you so much for reaching out to us and sending us your book. That was super awesome.
Of course, yeah. Super excited this worked out, and I get to talk with you guys about the fire service. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. So just like everywhere, we want to know a little bit about your story. So a little bit about you, how you got in the fire service, family, your likes, all that kind of thing. So tell us about you.
So I am an only child. Don't judge me. Okay. Wasn't my choice. I still beat up my parents for that, but I had a lot of food allergies, like severe food allergies when I was a kid. So I was off the wall. Like if I had anything with artificial flavors or any kind of those dyes like Red 40 and whatever that stuff is, I would literally go insane. My mom used to call Sunny Delight rocket fuel. If I got my hands on that, watch out. So I guess I was too much of a pain for them to have anymore. So I guess it's partly my fault then. But growing up, just in Jupiter, Florida, really nice place. If you've never been there, great place to visit. Really pretty water. It's kind of like real like Bahamian Caribbean water. We have a really beautiful waterway. So I grew up surfing, fishing, diving, all those kinds of things. And never gave a thought to becoming a fireman or anything in the medical field until like literally the 12th, like right when the clock struck 12 type of deal, where I was going to Fort Lauderdale Art Institute for industrial design, and some firefighters that I knew kind of pulled me aside and said, listen, don't do that. Like, we know you, just don't do that. Become a firefighter instead, like us. And I said, okay. I never thought about it. Tell me about it. They're like, okay, you do this, you get to run these kind of calls. You could retire in 20 years or 25 years. And I was like, okay, yeah, it sounds pretty good. All right, let's do that. So then I just totally 180 and started doing all the certification classes, EMT, paramedic, fire, and got hired with Boca pretty quickly, and been there for 17 years and really enjoyed my career there. Got to do a lot of things, run a lot of different calls, be a part of a lot of good crews, and be a part of a lot of, good saves and have a lot of nice experiences. So that's pretty much the long and short, I guess you could say.
How big is your department? How many stations? How many?
We have 8 stations.
Okay.
And we usually, out of most of them, except for one, run at least a suppression unit and then an ambulance out of each one. And every unit has 3 people. So, okay. And everybody is a paramedic. So every vehicle is ALS for the city. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So
you have 3 people in the ambulance too? Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
and it's a four-door, like international style front with the patient compartment back. And that vehicle is also equipped with fire equipment. So each firefighter has a CBA, has all the different tools they need other than water and hose, and some of the bigger stuff we keep on the suppression unit. So they can, and they have a officer as well, a lieutenant. So our hierarchy goes firefighter, driver, lieutenant, captain, and then lieutenant chief, and so on. But so for combat in the station, you'll have usually with the rescue, which is our ambulance, you'll have a lieutenant, two firefighters, and then you'll have the suppression unit, which would be the captain, the driver, and firefighter.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Somebody here was just talking about that the other day, that they're like, I think there's places that have ambulances that have an officer on their truck. And I was like, I think so. I think it's in Florida.
Yeah, we do that a lot down here. We have a very, how should I put this nicely? I'll just say large EMS manual. Makes even Brady would agree it's a pretty large manual just for protocols. So I feel it's a good thing that we do have a lieutenant as an officer on that vehicle, someone that's just got a little bit higher professional ability, to make sure all of those protocols are done correctly. And I think it's good because when you have that 3-man rescue, they operate a lot of times autonomously. Like I don't see them. They'll go out and run a medical call, and I don't know what they do, which is nice because then they have an officer that can take charge. It's not, 3 guys that if something goes south, they're like, hey, it was him, who's the lead medic? There is an officer in charge, someone that can make sure things happen appropriately.
Huh. That's good stuff. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into the book stuff, because it, like I said, it's so much the stuff that Kyle and I love to talk about that's near and dear to our hearts. So one of the first things that I read in your book, you talk about comparing and how people like to compare the fire service to a paramilitary or a military organization. And Kyle and I get so ticked about that because, we'd love to say that we are and set it up that way. And I think you talk about maybe in the fire academy recruit setting, maybe that's applicable, but then it just really isn't. You can't live that way, and we can't operate that way. We're just not set up that way, and we shouldn't be. So what's your thoughts? Expand on that and tell our listeners kind of what you get into in the book about that.
Right. Yeah. So obviously we do share some similarities. The hierarchical, the way that we use our hierarchy. There's a lot of, paramilitary aspects that way. The command that we use, all those different things. And they have their place. They have their place definitely, in the fire academy. They have their place sometimes on calls, right, where we need to use those hierarchies appropriately to get things done in a timely fashion. We don't necessarily have time to form a committee type thing, right? But most of that should either stay in fire academy. Obviously, this is my opinion, stay in fire academy, right? And stay to those serious calls where it's needed. But where we diverge from the military is that when we get back to the station, again, we're just regular citizens, really, waiting for the next time that we're deployed type deal. So we're living together, we're dealing with different things of life, right? We're not deployed for months. We're just there for the 24, maybe 48, whatever it may be, and we go home. And we have to be able to differentiate that time, right, where we can turn it on and turn it off. It can't just be turned on all the time. So I look at when we're in that station environment, right, that's got to be the ultimate safe place. When those type of military aspects come out and we're on scene, that's one thing. But as soon as we get back to the firehouse, that becomes a safe place again, where we're not using our authority in that way. We're not creating a space where people don't feel comfortable enough to want to come to work. Number one, that'd be worst case scenario. But number two, to be themselves, speak their mind, be open to learn, be open to teach others, right? All those things that make a healthy environment work. And then that translates right out to the field. And that's kind of what the main book is about in a nutshell, because there's so many strategy and tactics books. I feel like we don't have an issue with that, right? With that strategy and tactics as much, but it's the soft skills that we do. And the kicker to that is if those soft skills aren't there, if you're not really kicking butt in the station, it does not translate to the street.
Right.
It just doesn't. And in the book, I talk about, I think, firefighter with a smile leaving the station, no matter how new, will outwork any veteran firefighter with a frown, hands down. And I'm sure you've seen that many times where you got a disgruntled guy. He could be one of the best firefighters, drivers, lieutenants, captains, whatever it be on the department. But if he doesn't have the attitude to back it up, to use those skills appropriately, it's useless. So the whole deal is in that firehouse environment. If we create the right one, then they can actually get out there and do the customer service, right? Because the internal customer service, which I kind of hate that term of like the internal customer service, but I don't know how else to put it. When we have it right at home, then we can go out and help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. If you take care of each other or take care of your members, they'll take care of your citizens. Like, that's our fire chief's philosophy, and it works. It really does. So in your department, is that, and I don't know how much you want to talk about your department, but do you have a culture of that, or is this something that's kind of like your opinion, or is it just how is it working in your department?
So I'm going to say I'm biased, okay, but I would put our department up against any department for customer service. We go above and beyond for our clientele, for the citizens in our city, and a lot of that has to do with the leadership. A lot of it has to do with the leadership at the station level, and a lot of it has to do with the leaders that have left too. And I feel like, and that's kind of getting into that article a little bit, is when you really focus on customer service, you are in a better mental place. And when you're in a better mental place, then you can do better customer service, not the other way around. So it's kind of like the vicious cycle, but positive, right? So we've kind of been in this nice setting where we have been giving good customer service, and because of that, it's kind of been snowballing to where we're continuing that. Now, there's some of them that in my department, I'm sure, be like, "Oh, you're." I don't know about that. I think some of our customer service is waning, but I think it's pretty good, at least in the social circles, so to speak, that I can kind of influence or be a part of. We definitely try to do our best for those there, and I make it a point to do the best customer service I can do because of how closely I feel that it is related to our mental health. I think it's one of the pinnacle pieces of mental health, and why we get burnout is because we're not doing that good customer service. So there's many reasons why customer service may wane, and it may start to kind of stall or not be as good. But one thing I will tell you will happen immediately when it does is, whether people know it or not, is they're going to start feeling, they're not going to feel that purpose and meaning that they've been getting from the job, right? Because when you do good customer service, you go out there, you're helping someone, you're giving them your best, it feels good. It makes you want to continue to do that, and to continue to look for those opportunities to help, and then you can kind of pay yourself back, right, on all those things. And okay, I did a great job there. I feel good about that. I want to continue to do this, right? The unfortunate part is when that starts to go away, right, for whatever reason, you don't get that feedback, and then that's when the burnout starts, right? So customer service goes down, you feel worse. Burnout starts creeping in, keeps going down and down and down and down and down until customer service sucks and you're burned out.
Yeah, it's almost like I'd have to ask my therapist if this is true or not. But in my mind, it's that dopamine reward center. You need that dopamine, that feedback, that reward center to be activated, and it keeps those positive feelings in the right direction.
And I feel like a lot of times now, especially post-COVID, and the political elements that we're dealing with right now, where everything is so separated, I think that's one of the biggest lasting effects of COVID now is the divisiveness of politics, and that's found its way into the firehouse, unfortunately. But just firehouse aside, when we're on the street, that divisiveness, I'm sure you've seen, has made people paranoid, and attitude towards police, fire, and all those things has changed a lot to where it's not as easy to give customer service as it was, post 9/11, or after. I mean, the people weren't super happy with us after 2009 because they were blaming our pensions. but like there was definitely times where, before COVID, people were happy to see us, even if it was an emergency or you see them at, your grocery store or whatever. Now it's changed a bit. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to do that customer service when you're already being treated a certain way, right? And that's really unfortunate. And you have to fight that and make sure that you're doing that customer service for yourself. I believe in that article that I wrote for Fire Engineering and put it in Fire Nation is that don't think that customer service is for the customer. Don't think that customer service is for the city or anyone else, but it's for you as the one providing it over a 30-year career. It's not for them. It's for you. Like if you want to survive a 30-year career and love what you do at the end of it, and not be burned out and hate everyone, you got to continue that customer service because that's the only way you get back to yourself. You got to reflect on that and say, okay, look what I did. I did these things. I helped these people. It helps me overcome those mental health issues. It helps me overcome a lot of that stuff because I know that I've made a difference and I've did my best, and that's definitely a protection in a lot of ways. And it's not like a fill my ego type thing. Look how great I am. It's a self-reflective thing. Like, okay, I got to help that person today. I got to be a good person today. Let me put some currency back in my emotional bank type deal. And as leaders have to be aware of that, right? And be on top of it, not just for themselves to make sure that they're whole, right? And that good customer service is being done, but to point it out to their people. Like you go on a call and people do a great job. You lead them hopefully to do that job and no one says boo about it. On the way back to the station, say, hey guys, I don't know if you noticed, but this is what you did. You did X, Y, Z, right? This is how it affected them. Think if that was your family and the firefighters in your neighborhood came and did that for you guys, how would you feel? Pretty good, right? Give yourself a pat on the back, guys. Okay. And that kind of stuff is really the way forward in this kind of modern era of what we're dealing with on the street and how we're going to save ourselves from more of this mental health decay.
Yeah. I like that because I think we get into this habit. If you've been in the service for a while, of all the times you provide customer service just kind of become average. It becomes the level of expectancy, and you don't point out that a lot of times it is a really big deal. And even if it's a little deal, it's still good customer service, and pointing that out regularly keeps that in people's minds, that it's not a big deal to us because we do it all the time, but it is a big deal to the people that we interact with. So that's really,
right.
Really important.
And a lot of times too, that people like, it's just my job, and be like, yeah, that's right. That is your job, but you did it well. So
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
We've all seen people that's got a job, they suck at it. So what, but that you went above and beyond and you did it well, pat yourself on the back. It's okay,
Yeah.
So yeah, that to me is one of the biggest things I feel like is what's making the fire service amongst many other things, but the mental health issue is I think that's a key portion that we really got to focus on is when we're doing our job to realize the care that we're giving in the long run is really for us, right? And the short term is for them, but in the long term it's for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting it. And, I've never thought about it like that, but I think that's really good and something to definitely keep in your mind and how it's all becomes full circle. And as you said, over that 30-year career, and I think that's so important. You hit on, there's so much to unpack with what you've been talking about. We'll try to zero it in a little bit, but you talk about, the world has changed. On the back of your book, I like, the world has changed, the fire department has changed, and the firefighters you serve with have changed. And I think, we talk about that a lot. And I think in general, most people are understanding that. But in our industry, and I think just in society, you talked about that division, and I feel like there's some of that division in our industry, just not politically, but we have the old school way, and then we have people like us who just want to have these conversations. Carrie and I say we might not have the answers. Let's just start talking about and exploring these other ways of doing things. Not saying they're going to work, but let's try them, because the old ways are not working, and they're not getting people into our industry. They're not keeping people healthy, both physically and mentally. But we still have this, it's still there. So it's almost like, how do you combat that when you're trying to progress in a different direction? Sometimes we've talked about things of, you just got to draw that line in the sand, and, those people are going to be that way. And, it's almost a protection. We have to play defense with our younger people, right? We have to play defense in
Right.
terms of, we can't let that affect what they're going to be over their career. So,
Right.
If you want to speak to that a little bit, or some insight on, how do you combat that? Because I think that's like one of the biggest challenges facing, especially when you talk about mental health and you talk about words like empathy and emotions. And it is tough in this industry to bring this stuff up. I think
Yep.
the younger people are eager for it, but sometimes maybe a little bashful because there's still the old timers saying that you're soft and you're
Right.
weak.
Yeah, I mean, this is I'd say $1 million, but now it's like the $1 trillion
Right.
question, especially with the fire service. I want to start off by prefacing this with saying, unfortunately, when people are looking to reach out to become a leader, let's say in the fire service, an officer of some type, a lot of times the thought is, if I'm going to go and do this, I might as well do this and get paid a little bit more, right, to do the same thing. They couldn't be farther from the truth. So why I'm saying this is that if you're looking to go become an officer in the fire service, especially now, it is a lot more than that, a lot more. So, and it's exactly what you're saying. So now all of a sudden you're in the position to where you have to motivate and lead the people that are there to to continue to not just get along, right? To get along well as a team, to want to continue to do that, to train and learn and whatnot, and then make that happen on the street, right? So there's a lot to that. So my point is you're going to work really hard. Number one, get ready to work hard. And when you have that mindset, it helps, because that's what it's going to take. And for me, when I have different generations in the firehouse, right? The first thing I try to do is just be the example of what I want. So if I'm looking for people to appreciate one another, I'm looking for all our similarities. I'm validating the different strengths that they have, right? That way they see that, okay, that's what he's doing. He seems to get along with everyone, right? He seems to see all the strengths, right? Whether they're really picking it up, on a conscious level or not, it's there, right? So they're seeing how that environment is, how I'm creating that environment. So everyone there is special to me in some way. I don't care who it is, right? So I try to take time, like I talk to each person, and anyone that works with me knows this. Like, I'm a big guy with the coffee cup. I go talk to you in the kitchen if you're there. I go talk to you over here. I go talk to you there. What are you doing here? What are you doing there? What's going on in your life? Let me get a rundown of where you are, right? And then I know a lot of things. So when I start getting different dissensions, like this freaking guy, he voted this way, he did whatever. I'll be like, yeah, but did you know that he actually goes out and he works at a charity place and he does X, Y, Z? And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, he's a pretty good dude. Like, or for whoever that's there, you can find those similarities. And a lot of times those positives are a much easier way to overcome any of those negatives. So I try to be the example of what I want. Then I try to highlight the positives of the other individuals, right? Each individual, so that all they're running on is positive, right? They're seeing them in a bright light and not a dark light. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It doesn't happen overnight. Like, I don't just go into, maybe it's like I got put into a crew, that's very negative. It takes time. It takes time to kill negativity. That's why it's such a cancer. Talk about it in the book, how much of a cancer negativity is. And it's like wildfire, man. Once it starts to go, it takes off. So you got to kill that right away. You got to find the positive things. You have to find the strength of each of your people, and you have to highlight those things. And then you better keep a mirror close and make sure you're not doing anything to ruin that. So there's a lot to that. And I feel like that when you approach your crew like that, it doesn't matter their age. It doesn't matter if they're older or younger. People want to be validated for their efforts, especially in our line of work, right? So if you can pick out, hey, you're really good at that. Hey, you're doing that great, awesome. Like, hey, did you know he's doing this? Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, he is, and she's doing this, and whatever it is, they're like, oh, cool. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna go talk to them about that. And then if you pair that with training, that then you really start to become symbiotic, like synergistic, right? Where you have the older driver, something like that. That's like always the cliche, right? You have the driver, he's the dinosaur driver. Never gonna leave, right? You start working off it, like they're not getting along with maybe one of your younger firefighters for whatever reason. What I would do is same thing. I'd highlight their strengths. I'd go to that driver and be like, dude, you are really good at this. Well, I'm not being like cheesy, but like I know you're good at this. I need you to help me. The new person is really looking to want to learn this, and I could send him out, but I'd rather him be with you, right? So now what I'm doing is I'm pairing you together to get something done, right? And I prepped you with the right attitude to want to do it, right? So I'm working. If there's any two people that I'm like, man, I think maybe they could get along a little better, I'll try to find a way to make that happen. And usually you can do that at the station level through some kind of training or whatever. And when you continue to highlight strengths instead of weaknesses, I think that's a really great way to just bring people together and instead of let divisiveness set in. And then on the flip side of that, when you hear divisiveness, that's when you're like, hey guys, no, please don't do that. We're not going to talk about that. Like, but that's where you have to be a good example of that. Because if you do that, then be like, well, this freaking guy, that's all he talks about. Now we can't, so it's tough. So again, like you got to come thinking, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work harder than I ever have, if I'm going to be in this leadership position.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes I see folks around this area that they want to get promoted to get off the ambulance. That's here. Yeah. It gets you off the ambulance. Now you'll ride it sometimes, but that's like their main goal. I'm like, you have your work cut out for you if that's the reason you're getting promoted. And here our promotion process is set up pretty good. That's not what happens here, but I do see that in other departments around me that's the reason they want to get promoted. So it's a really insightful and I like the way that you model that behavior because you can't talk the talk and not walk the walk for sure.
Yeah. And obviously you're not going to be perfect.
Right.
And this stuff. And then when you're not, just be like, dude, I messed up. Well, let's move on, and just own it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So I'm curious too, a lot of insightful stuff and great stuff. Like, how'd you get there? It sounds like there's been some experiences behind a lot of that growth and where your mindset is. I mean, I could say the same for me, like where my mindset is, where it was. Like what has led you, I guess, down this path to want to talk about, leadership, that initial step into leadership, and talk about kind of those soft skills a little bit more, and some of the stuff that you've been talking about on how you present yourself now. Like how'd you get there? How did you develop all this?
It's a lot of critical thinking, on experiences that happen to you. So it's how do you want to take an experience, whether it's positive or negative, right? You could take it at face value and you could move on, or you could kind of, not without making yourself crazy, but you could, kind of dissect some of what took place, right? And say, okay, on this negative experience, this and this and this, it didn't work, right? It didn't work for me. It definitely didn't work for them. So how could I change that? And most likely the biggest quality you're going to employ in that situation is empathy, right? How would I want this? How would I want my child or my son or my wife or anyone that I love, my mom or my dad? Like if I was going to do the same thing and have the same relationship with them, would I treat them like that? Probably not. Or whatever it is, how would I do it? Or a trusted friend or whatever. So you can dissect the experiences that you have, right? And you can learn from them. Or, on the positive side, you can say, hey, you know what? That really worked. Let me write that one down. Okay. I don't know. I might not know even what I did there, but that situation went really well. Let me think why. I guess, yeah, if I was in that situation and this happened to me, and I'd be like, yeah, I think I would, respond positively to that. So okay, let me write that down. I'll use that one again for sure. So there's looking back and trying to learn from experiences, right? There's also just taking time to make yourself better, and that's one of the hardest things. And in the book, I talk about 4 things that, in my opinion, are the most important things of leadership. Right? Is understanding service, because it will be service, right? That you will be providing. Servant leadership. It's the first word there. You're providing a service to those people as a leader. So understanding that brings you to the next thing, which is sacrifice. You're going to be sacrificing a lot. If you're going to serve someone, that's sacrifice. So what does that look like? It looks a lot like sacrificing time and energy and so forth, and how we get there. But to do that, then we need another quality called self-control, to be able to prioritize those things, control ourselves, control our emotions in the right way to be able to make that happen. And then the quality that ties that all together, it's humility. Without it, we won't be able to do any of it. So when we understand what qualities we want to have, now we have to work to have them, right? So there's a foundational issue that I try to work on myself, is look at those things. And it's a lot easier when you have a spouse that points them all out.
That's
Like
awesome.
my wife, she's like, so if you don't have a mirror, or you have too much ego to look in the mirror and say, okay, that's what's wrong, you could just go ask your wife or your husband or your spouse or whatever, and they'll tell you. And then you'll know what you need to work on, and then work on it. Get better at it. If they know you well, that you probably need to work on it. So get it done. So that's like the foundational part of it, right? Learning from your past experiences, and then having the confidence in yourself, right? Finding that confidence to go out there and be vulnerable enough to do it, to get out there, try to lead, understand that mistakes will come, right? Get over those mistakes, grow from the mistakes, try again. And that's why in the book too, I put that chapter of overcoming fear. That's something that, when they're pinning a badge on their chest, they're not saying, okay, get ready to be scared a lot. But that's normal. You should be scared. You should be there. If you're not in fear of something, you probably got a screw loose, right? And you're probably making really poor decisions, especially since our job is risk analysis. So all that stuff is part of it. And it's definitely a work in progress, right? You're never gonna master being a leader, especially in the fire service. And you're never gonna be the best person. We're all imperfect. So it's just trying to do your best, and to not just do your best for your crew, but really enjoy it. Like, I feel like my most favorite moments is not when I succeeded in something, it's when someone that I helped succeeds, like on that mentorship thing. And really, mentorship is the beating heart of leadership. And when that takes place, right now, where the person that you mentored now is a lieutenant or a captain, and they're doing a really good job, I see that and I'm like, now I feel good. That's really legacy, I guess. But so I guess a really long about way of saying you're gonna have to work really hard and be vulnerable and work on stuff that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah, I wrote down like some of my favorite parts of your book was the section where you talk about investigate with empathy, because that was always when I was a young leader and I would hear of people being disciplined or written up, whatever reprimand disciplinary process you have. And I always would think, well, well, they did that because of this. Or I always would think about, well, what made them make that mistake? And I always kind of erred on the side of the person that was screwing up, because I always knew there was some reason. They didn't do it on purpose. And it was like, well, hey,
Right.
you know that they did this because they didn't really have all the training, or they didn't know that that was the expectation, or they were trying to do the right thing and it just didn't play out that way. And I and then I thought I was being weak, because I thought that was too much of a feminine way to look at things in the fire service. And once I got more comfortable in that and got over the fear of that, I leaned into it. I realized it was a more empathetic way to be a leader, and it worked much, much better for me.
Oh yeah, and that's how you get by.
Yeah,
That's
and you talk about that in your book, is if you've got to discipline somebody, they have to have the buy-in and the desire to make the change to get the behavior modification. And I loved every part of that chapter. So
yeah.
that was
If you don't treat people that way, right, then what you create is a fear-based culture, right? And in a fear-based culture, everyone goes into self-preservation mode. So they will never reach up and do anything spectacular. They will only do enough to make sure they don't get in trouble, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that you'll just be in this quagmire of maybe good enough. So we gotta figure out how to get past that, and you get past that by understanding people are people, just like you are, and having some humility and saying, yeah, I probably shouldn't throw this rock in this glass house, because most likely I did the same stupid thing they did 10 years ago, and realizing that pretty much every problem in the firehouse is one of three things, right? It's going to be policy, training, or attitude. And most time for me, I found it's not attitude. Most of the time, it's usually training and policy. But if it's an attitude thing, that's the only one thing that's actually their fault. And a lot of times it's because there's something going on in their life that's pretty critical. It's usually not they just want to burn the world down today, So we need to figure out what that is. And again, if you care about them as a leader, which you should, then you want to figure out what that is and make sure that they find their solace again. Otherwise, all that's going to do is work against what you're trying to accomplish.
You good?
You look like you want to.
Oh, I thought Kyle was going to say something. I didn't want to interrupt him.
There's so much. I mean, my mind's just going, and there's just so much there. And, living through some of those environments, I guess, is the challenge for a lot of people, and especially younger leaders, when you're living in those environments where it is fear-based, where your top leadership is that way, or you're in these environments of everything that we're against and what we're talking about, and it's almost how do you navigate those, and that's where like that division is, and you have these younger people coming in, and it's navigating those environments that are still that old school way that want nothing to do with the stuff that we're talking about, and you're trying to promote this kind of stuff and have these conversations, and it ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, no, I've been there. Believe me, I've been there. When I first started driving, it was early on in my career. I was able to promote quickly, and I was driving for some older captains that were pretty hard to drive for. Like, I did not want to come to work. I was actually thinking, I haven't been at this department that long. I could move departments. And what I started to think to myself was, I'm going to learn something. It may be difficult. I have to show patience, but I'm going to learn something, because they won't be here forever, and I will. And I'm going to change it when I get there. So for me, it was like, I'm not going to just run from this problem. I'm going to tackle it. And I looked on, there was good captains that I worked for. It was like, I want to be like him or her. And there was some that I was like, I'm learning a lot of what I'm never going to do, because this does not work. So I'm making the mental, checklists, and like, these XYZ, yeah, I could see how that went over, and it went over pretty bad, so I'm definitely not doing that. And it took, a lot of patience. It took a lot of inner strength, and a lot of that inner strength comes from home, right? So when we're facing these situations at work, turn to home too, and make sure you're doing your self-care, right? Make sure that you're putting your family first, whatever that looks like. Make sure that your foundation at home is really good, and be that leader that you wish you had, right? So get yourself prepped So when that opportunity shows itself and you finally get to come out of the mire, then you can come and you can make that station the place it should be, right? And remember what it was like, and make sure that it never returns to that. And a lot of that too is kind of a lot of self-reflective too, when you get to that point to where you can say, okay, I'm finally there, I'm doing these things, and make sure it is like that. You know, if you have someone say, hey, it comes to you and this thing is, it's making people a little like it's hard to work for you when you do that. That's when you're saying, okay, I've been here before, I've been that person before, I'm going to figure out how to make it so that it's not like that. Right. So it's tough, and it's not an overnight thing. I wish there was, you know, a magic wand you could wave for the, you know, these poor guys and girls that are under leadership that is poor like that. But my advice is to, number one, be the leader you want to be, like you wish you had, that you will be hopefully one day, and focus on home, focus on self-care, focus on yourself, make yourself better. And if anyone is giving you a hard time, kill them with kindness. And everyone around that sees that, all they're going to see is that you're a nice person, and the people that are around you are not, that are treating you in that way. But hold on, you know, because when you get out onto the street and you do a good thing for, you know, family out there that's in distress or whatever it is, that's what it's all about. You know, that's really what it's all about. And make sure that you take that and you put it in your emotional bank to help to deal with what's happening at the station level. But again, that's kind of like where the book really came from too, is where like it's like appalling, the soft skills, really. And it's definitely changing because a lot of the newer generations are not soft skill adverse, right? They want that, right? So it is changing, but they still need the mentorship for it. You know, just because you want it doesn't mean you know how to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of my book's not the end all be all for that, not by any means. I didn't invent leadership, but it's just, you know, a way to look at how to create an environment in the station that, number one, you want to go to, that other people want to go to, and that when they leave the station, you're actually going to do a good job and, you know, make it through a long career, and make it not by being burned out and hating everything and moving into the middle of nowhere because you don't want to see another car or a person, you know, but to be happy, you know, when you leave. So there's a lot to it. There really is. And I hope that, you know, it does help, you know, some of the people that read it. But it's, I think, a good step in the right direction. Hopefully more books like that come out, right? So that more of that soft skill ideology is pushed, and in different ways that capture people in a way that mine doesn't.
Yeah. Kyle and I have been around a few different states, and it's interesting because in Texas and in Virginia, I feel like it's really catching on, and there's a lot of that mindset, and it's very refreshing. And I think there are departments out there that are killing it. And I do, before we wrap this up, want to talk too about something that you had said in the book, and you're talking about home life, and your wife points out what you need to work on. And you say in the book that she was the first to notice when you were struggling, you had some stuff going on, and, you know, some behavior changes. And that is so true, because you can have folks in your firehouse that mask it very well, but their spouse, I guarantee you, their family is noticing it. And that's so important, to listen to someone you trust at home that may be the only one that can see it, or to tell you, you know, because it's definitely been my case where I'm super irritable and angry and short-tempered. And my husband's like, whoa, is this something I need to support you with at home? Or is this something going on at work? Or what, you know, what's the deal? So for everybody out there, your spouse or family may be the only person noticing it if you're hiding it very well at work. But eventually it's going to show up in your workplace, and your coworkers are going to handle it one of two ways. They're going to say, oh, you're just crotchety and whatever, and they're not going to help you. Or hopefully you work for a really great crew or company officer that says, hey, what's going on? There's obviously something different going on, and how do we love you through that? So I'm glad you brought that part up too.
Yeah, you can't be, especially when you're coming into, the leadership role, you have to realize that you're going to have a lot of very uncomfortable, critical conversations.
Yeah.
And the faster that you realize that and get used to that, and maybe even work on your ability to converse and communicate in those situations, the better. And those conversations might not be just with someone else. It could be a conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
A critical conversation with yourself that, like, okay, yeah, I'm not doing so hot right now. Like, I'm not good. Why not? What's wrong? Let me think, work on these things. And, that's kind of like you mentioned what happened with me with, having some post-traumatic stress issues with that. Like when you go on shift for say 24 hours, you can mask something for 24 hours. That's definitely doable, especially because, if you can hide your bunk a bit or whatever, you can mask plenty of stuff for that. But you can't do it, 365.
Yeah.
So someone is going to see it, right? And hopefully it's someone that cares about you enough to say, hey, what we just saw, that ain't normal. Like, we're here to help you to deal with whatever that is. And it's really important for us to be honest with ourselves, to know, or to be willing to say, okay, yeah, let me help myself. And that chapter, Silent Killers, was meant mostly to help the officer to be honest with themselves. Because if you think that you're going to get through a 30-year career and you're going to see the things that we see and deal with the things that we deal with on the stress levels that we do, especially now with the way society is going, where we're the chances of running natural disasters, pandemics, active shooters, all these different things on a much greater scale is taking place. Like, you will have these issues, those post-traumatic stress issues. They might not become the disorder, but they're there. Like, so be honest with yourself that they're there. You're not Superman. Okay. You're not gonna get away with it. Right.
Yeah.
So we have to be honest with ourselves that it can't take place, to make sure that we do that self-care, that we take care of ourselves, especially because we're that leader and we're supposed to be the example in the firehouse, and we're supposed to help others to be able to do that. So we have to do it first. So like you're saying, where someone is in that environment and they're showing these signs, you can say, you know what, I've been honest with myself enough to know that I've felt that. I can tell I've felt that before, right? And I'm going to go and say something. And,
sorry, I think too, we talk a lot about company officer level leadership. And if we have listeners that, if you're a leader leading other leaders, it gets even harder to have those conversations sometimes. And so it's really important not just to be at the station level, the company level, but leaders at all levels in the fire service need to recognize that in their peers at all levels. And if you're leading other leaders, it doesn't change that fact that if you recognize it, reach out and make sure we're taking care of everybody.
Get ready for a lot of communication. The higher you go, right? If you're the leader of a leader, you're getting up into the higher echelons there. The more communication you do, the less actual skills that you do, right? At least physical skills.
Yes.
So the higher you go, the more you better get ready to talk. Otherwise, don't go there.
Yes. Yep.
That's my advice. If you want to keep moving up and you're an introvert, I don't want to talk, I don't want to. Okay, well, you might want to change a little bit of that, because the higher you go, you better get ready to start talking a lot, communicating a lot, getting into a lot of possibly uncomfortable conversations that you may not like, but that's going to be your job. Yeah. You're signing up for it,
Lots of hard conversations. I feel like that's my daily life.
Oh, yeah.
All righty. Well, this has been wonderful. Kyle, do you have anything else? You're just over there smiling. I can just see it.
I mean, there's we could go on for hours, and it's like, I'm in my mind, I'm like, all right, we can't go on for hours. So it's just
have to have that,
the bullet points. But at the end of the day, I think this is a great foundational book, for anybody going out and gonna want to move up, even if you're very early on in your career. I'm even gonna say, even if you're thinking about joining this career, I think this is a great book. and just to start a solid foundation of what leadership looks like in 2024, the direction it's going to go. And there's just a lot of vital information in there that's going to help you on your journey, regardless if you even started in this career yet. Because, we talk about building that strong foundation, and you got to start it somewhere. And sometimes when things are put in a simple way, easy to read, and a context like this, it makes it very easy to understand, which I think is good, especially for a lot of younger people coming in. So check it out, The Modern Fire Officer, for sure. And yeah, we might have to have more conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
I look forward to that.
Other stuff too for our listeners to check out. Your article was on Firefighter Nation.
Yeah.
Firefighter Nation. It's a customer service and mental health in the fire service. That was also a super great read. So
yeah, and we'll link that up on our social media stuff too.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. We're very grateful that you were willing to come on today and chat with us, and we hope to have more chats in the future.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
and Carrie
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.